Leonardo DiCaprio.
Miss Anne Hathaway.
Meryl Streep, The Iron Lady.
Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Kevin Costner. The King's Speech. Birdman.
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Redoing the Oscars, a weekly series where I talk about alternative picks to the Oscars in a bunch of these top categories to decide ultimately if the Academy got it right, and to share my love for some other alternative picks, ones that got nominated and ones that didn't. But if you're new to the series, welcome. What I've been doing now every single week, starting with the year 2015 and then working our way backwards. We are picking one category from the Oscars from that year and redoing it, saying, okay, what would be an alternative pick of someone that was nominated, maybe who should have gotten the Oscar. Let's talk about somebody who wasn't even nominated at all, why they should have been nominated, and ultimately try to figure out, did the Academy get it right? Was this the right decision, even if it wasn't against, say, my personal preference? But you guys have been showing a lot of support for these videos so far, commenting below, letting me know your maybe alternative picks. I'd love to hear that. That's part of the reason why I'm doing this series, is to get your thoughts and feedback, and want to be a real, open community in terms of sharing your opinions and thoughts on the different categories. Because yes, I thought that Matt Damon should have won for The Martian, but there were a lot of other good picks that year as well. And particularly when you talk about the alternative unnominated picks, it's always fun to look back on the Oscars 10 plus years and go like, how did that performance not even be in consideration? Lots of fun stuff in and around that we're going to be talking about this week, and really excited to talk about this week. So before we get into things, I actually want to start with some, like I do every single week, historical context. Where were we at the time before I give my alternative unnominated pick? And this was the 2012 Oscars, and this was the Argo Oscars, or in my opinion, the Ben Affleck Oscars. This was, not a film that was the clear frontrunner to win before it premiered at Telluride. I think going into the Oscar season, it was still, okay, you have Steven Spielberg working with the greatest actor living in Daniel Day-Lewis, and an American historical, setting, and incredible American figure in Abraham Lincoln. Maybe this is Spielberg's return to Best Picture. That ultimately does very well, but doesn't win. Zero Dark 30 was also a real contender, just because you have Catherine Bigelow reteaming with Mark Boal. They had just won previously for, The Hurt Locker. Now, a few years later, they're back with Zero Dark 30. That became a movie of controversy, even though it did ultimately sneak into Best Picture at the Oscars. But pretty much early on, I think, when Argo premiered at Telluride, it seemed like an old school classic Best Picture winner, in the likes of Robert Redford or Mel Gibson or Kevin Costner. These were all kind of big movie stars that weren't totally super well respected for their acting necessarily, who direct a movie and then all of a sudden are on top of the world and are widely respected. And Argo was like that. It was a movie star who hadn't really been super well respected necessarily for his acting, who directed a couple of movies after having gone through a real fallow period. 10 years before Argo, Ben Affleck was appearing in, not super well, critically beloved movies like Gigli, and then he ends up taking control of his narrative back, takes some time off acting, directs a movie, directs another movie, and then finally with Argo, it gets this kind of crowning achievement, this comeback. And we've talked about this phenomenon before already on this series, but the Oscars do love a comeback. And because Affleck, like McConaughey, in a similar time period here, was kind of in the fallow period and then has come back and taken control of his narrative and directed a movie that was really great and old school and reminded people of past Best Picture winners, Argo kind of continued on to have a life of itself. And then particularly when Ben Affleck didn't end up getting nominated for Best Director, I think that gave even more fuel and fire to the fact that Argo is definitely going to win Best Picture as the kind of way to totally celebrate Ben Affleck, even though the director's branch didn't nominate him. And this was a bit of a weird year for me personally, in the sense of my taste not really aligning with the Oscars. I'd say probably only 1 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees line up with my own personal top 10, maybe 2. But that was kind of a category where I wasn't feeling super passionate about Best Picture. I think that the wins for Best Actress and Best Actor, I'm totally happy with. And then something like Best Supporting Actor, I thought, maybe Philip Seymour Hoffman for, The Master, an incredible performance, one of my favorite performances of the decade. But he'd already won an Oscar before, and we haven't covered the supporting actress category yet, and this was a great opportunity to talk about actually one of my favorite actors, which is Amy Adams. So let's talk about that now. My alternative nominated pick that I think should have won the Oscar in 2012 is Amy Adams for The Master. I think it's almost underappreciated still right now just how dominant of an actress she was, and what an incredible run Amy Adams went on from the years of 2008 to 2013, a 6-year period. She was nominated 4 times at the Oscars. I mean, she was a staple, and her next 10 years after the fact, or her most recent 10 years, have been a little bit more murky, but longtime fans of the show, particularly of my Connors series, know that I'm a big fan of hers, and I've actually rewarded some of her performances, even though I haven't totally loved all of her movies. I still think she has an incredible charm and ability to just transform and play every different type of character, which makes it so fascinating. But if you were to kind of look back on this period and go, the fact that someone gets nominated 4 times in 6 years, you want to reward that period, you want to reward that kind of an excellence. Which year are you going to do it for what performance? I think this one makes the most sense here, just because it's connected to Paul Thomas Anderson. You know that The Master is going to exist for many years to come, and for many people, they consider it one of his best films. So you have one of our premier filmmakers with one of their best films. The Master at the time really wasn't well appreciated, it just got these acting nominations, but maybe in hindsight it is a movie that to kind of reward Amy Adams for her entire great period here, but then also to reward the film with something. This makes the most sense. But it's also a personal preference for sure. I am just personally really enamored by what Amy's able to do here. And what I love so much about her performance in this film is that she's not really competing with the other actors. When you think about a big acting showcase like The Master, the 2 men at the center, and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix, now at the time maybe not necessarily so, but now I think definitely regarded as 2 of the greatest actors, or the 2 great actors of their generation, particularly for someone like Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's gone too soon. But so much of the movie is them kind of feeding off of each other's energy. It's their dynamic, it's their relationship, it's their back and forth. There are very few scenes in which they are alone. It's always about the dynamic between the 2 men. That's what I think makes the movie so interesting. And yet you have Amy Adams going up against these other 2 actors, some of the best of their generation, and almost not competing. And that's what I find so fascinating about her role, is that she doesn't take on the energy of the other actors in the scene. So much of the, Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman dynamic is them feeding off each other's energy. And then Amy Adams, who's in many scenes with the 2 of them, has to not kind of feed off that energy, has to have her own kind of a rhythm. And I think that's difficult as an actor, to not to kind of pick up on the energy of the scene, but to stay controlled and calm and reserved, which I think only adds to the larger themes of the movie. Her character, by being kind of this steely, in control, calmly registered person, makes us question who the Master really is, and adds, I think, some creepiness and unnaturalness to the film that makes it so effective, because it has this unkiltered feature. You're not necessarily sure who you're following or what you're supposed to be thinking. And when you have kind of a blank-esque or a controlled performance like Amy Adams that seems very manicured and considered, you almost want to lean in more. I always feel like she has this tractor beam on me throughout the entire film, that she can actually hypnotize me and actually make me believe in kind of this religion, because of her kind of gaze and her ability to modulate her voice to be very monotone in a way, or steady, to be supremely patient, to not have a hair out of place, in control, calm the entire way. So just as a testament of an acting feat, I think the fact that she's able to make a different type of performance, not try to compete with the other 2 great actors, but do something a little bit different, makes her stand out more, and makes her way more engaging. And then I think adding to the themes of the movie of who is the Master, so much of that is reliant on her performance. Yes, Paul Thomas Anderson, I think a few times, frames her beautifully and puts her in the right place. But many times I'm looking towards her, even though she's not saying anything, because of how she's holding herself, the kind of quaintness and calmness in which she has placed her body, the way she sits in the chair, the way she delivers lines. And I think it's a testament to the fact that I think the most impactful hypnotic scene in the movie is that scene where she looks dead in the camera and asks what color are my eyes, and does that kind of hypnosis type of a process that the cause is so interested in expanding. And I just think her ultimate role within the story is perfectly executed by her as a performer, because her role as a character is to kind of accentuate and demonstrate the buffoonery and literally support the main actors of Freddie Quell and Lancaster Dodd. And she does that. And she does that by remaining calm, by modulating her voice, by making sure her physical appearance is never sporadic, but always in control. And I think that just adds to the themes of the film so much more. So when you talk about a supporting actress, she's not so much trying to take over scenes, she's trying to support characters, but still draw attention to herself and show that maybe there's deeper underlying themes within the story. And she does that. She is the perfect kind of supporting actor in this film. And I think without the movie, people won't realize how important she is, because without her, if you were to take out all of her scenes, it would be a little bit more farcical. I think it would be a little bit more silly, more obviously necessarily a comedy. Rather, she brings some of that mystery and creepiness, I think, and hypnotic element to the power of this cause and this relationship, and the kind of definition of the animal versus the order that the movie is so interested in portraying. I think she's absolutely fantastic in the film, and is so important to making a great movie great. Should that not also consider the fact of winning supporting role? I know so many supporting roles today are actually co-leads, but this is actually a genuinely true great supporting role in a great movie from a great actor. This is probably her time. Looking back on it now, if you want to reward this great period, this was the opportunity, the best opportunity, I think, to reward her. But now talking about someone else that was not even nominated, that I think probably should have gotten nominated. My favorite performance of the year is Amy Adams, so I think she probably should have won. But my alternative unnominated pick, I think, should have gotten nominated at the Oscars, even though it probably wouldn't have happened. And that's Brie Larson in 21 Jump Street. This is a great period of Brie Larson. I think sometimes people forget just how excellent of an actor she was during this time period of Scott Pilgrim into this, into Short Term 12. It was this really exciting period of this young actress, and then of course winning for Room. She kind of got swallowed by the Marvel machine for a decade there, so I'm hoping she kind of gets back to more of her traditional dramas and showcases how great of an actor she is. But what I love so much about this performance is, similar to Amy Adams, it's a true supporting performance in that it helps us believe the story that's being told. Of course, I'm not going to say she's the best part of the movie necessarily. I understand that the main appeal of 21 Jump Street is that great chemistry between Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. But so much of us believing, I think, in the emotional kind of splitting of the two men is the fact that Jonah actually wants to stay in high school. His character, Schmidt, actually likes being in high school and has convinced he can go to college, and he's gone in kind of too deep on this undercover case. And so much of us understanding why he's gotten so deep into the undercover story is his relationship with Brie Larson, which seems like there is some genuine connection. If this was a lesser actor and there wasn't any connection, we wouldn't really buy that when Jonah's talking about, I want to stay here, I want to go to college. We would just think it's funny. We wouldn't actually think that there's some emotional truth to it there, which I think makes the movie more rewarding. So when you have an actor like Brie Larson that's able to, develop a great relationship and a genuine kind of romantic chemistry with Jonah Hill's character, but then also make her scenes with him just as funny as the ones with Channing Tatum, it adds so much to the movie, because now it's not like, we have to go to the boring romance plot to get away from the comedy. The boring romance plot can actually be emotionally impactful for us to understand Schmidt as a character, but then also be enjoyable itself. And what I think she does so great in this movie on rewatch that I hadn't totally picked up on, because I'm of course not always just looking at her performance, but this time I was really trying to focus in on her scenes, is her ability to use awkward silences or pauses. I think are really strong in this film. It just makes it feel more alive. It feels like she's not waiting for her turn to talk, but genuinely trying to process and understand and respond back to the actor. Now, some of that has to do with the awkward silences of just, young love or high school romances making more sense and being true and honest, because you don't know what to say necessarily. You're not seasoned in that sense. But then also I think it adds to the sense of that dry humor, which her character is so great at, where she kind of fakes you out and then reveals that she's just, messing with you. throughout all of her constant scenes, she almost seems to take a pause and then say her words, and it's that effect, I think, that brings a sense of just life and humanity to her character that makes her feel so much more of a real person, that she has this extra kind of a wattage when she smiles, and you understand why Jonah is enamored with her and why he kind of wants to stay in this kind of world, in this kind of community, and there's a sense of truth to that, and it's kind of a nothing part, and yet it's still, her performance is critical in terms of adding an extra level of depth. I think if this was a poor actress, the movie still would have been funny, but there's actually a sense of genuine emotion. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we understand why Jonah Hill's character Schmidt is so involved within this. And he's so involved with this because of this relationship, because you buy this relationship. And she gets her great comedic moments too. So absolutely, when you see this movie, I thought, oh, of course she's going to be the next huge star and win an Oscar. I was early on, in part because the short-term 12 in this movie, I just really wanted to see what she was doing next. And I think because it's a dumb comedy, people never would have considered her, but going back, if we watch that movie again, she stands out and she takes a kind of a nothing part and elevates it to something that's definitely memorable. But now, to end off the video, did the Academy make the right decision? And kind of, yes. When I look back on this, I'm trying to be objective. The point of the series is to redo the Oscars, and I'm picking certain categories that I think could have been redone. So in many ways, did the Academy get it right? Every episode I'm going to say no. But this one I'm actually going to say yes, just because I'm trying to separate the fact of my love of Amy Adams in The Master and my love of Amy Adams as an actress generally. Because when you try to look at this objectively, I think you go, okay, Jackie Weaver, would it have been nice to her to get an Oscar? Sure, but she's not considered one of the greatest actors of all time. It would have been a legacy award anyways. Silver Linings Playbook isn't her best performance. It would be a weird win for her. Then you look at someone like Helen Hunt in The Sessions. She's already won an Oscar before, so, I think one is good for her. And The Sessions isn't a very well, remembered movie. Sally Field, who's good in Lincoln, but a bit of a controversial performance. Not everyone loves her in that movie, and she's already won before. So, you have people who have already won before, or not in their best performances, and then that leaves us with the winner in Anne Hathaway for Les Miserables, and then Amy Adams in The Master. And I think Anne Hathaway is the bigger movie star. I think she has probably just as much or more fans than Amy Adams, and you see her this year. She's in all these great movies and is going to be a real big part of 2026. So it makes sense for her to have an Oscar. If she hadn't won then, we'd be looking to give her probably an award sometime this year, maybe even. So to give her an Oscar then early on in her career and reward, the great actress that Anne Hathaway is, I'm a big fan of Anne Hathaway. I may give her another Oscar some other time when I'm taking it away here. But looking back on it objectively, Amy Adams was doing all these great performances. She would have probably, and at 2012, we would have thought, oh, she's probably going to have at least 5-6 other great performances. And she did. She didn't win for any of them. But there was opportunities there where Anne Hathaway had a commanding role in a very physical role. She shaved her head. There was this kind of a traditional Oscars commitment that I think they appreciated. And I don't really want to take away something from Anne Hathaway. So my personal preference is Amy Adams in The Master. If you were to reward a movie in this period, definitely this one. My personal opinion, I give her an award every 5 years, seems like. But I think from the historical context of things, trying to be objective, I think more people probably like Anne Hathaway than Amy Adams, and are ultimately glad that Anne Hathaway does have an Oscar, even if it's not her most iconic film. But love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think it maybe on the objective high-level point of view, it was the right Oscar? Do you think that this was the right category to talk about? Maybe you're a fan of The Master, but you think Joaquin should have won? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But that's about it. Stay tuned to next week where we're going to be talking about the 2011 Oscars. Should be a fun one as well. And we're going to continue these episodes every single week, Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, going up until the next Oscar season. So sit back, relax, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you never miss a video. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.